One of the more interesting, one of the really integral, important roles that Aboriginal played during the goldfields period was off the goldfields, as in on the pastoral stations, as they were called, on the sheep stations. That we know through Sovereign Hill the rush, that actual word rush, where people put down their tools, left their occupations en masse. That Melbourne and Geelong became literally deserted towns. And it wasn't just the towns and the cities that became deserted, it was the cattle stations and sheep stations, the breadbasket, if you like, of Victorian economy was left without a workforce. We have this point where pastoralists in this very area, the Gulf, I'm trying to think of the station's name. Anyway, the station owner wrote in his correspondence that another squatter had poached his Aboriginal workers. He was livid, trying to demonstrate to his station manager, when you see our native workers, tell them to come back. And 50% of that particular company, that's the name of the company, a huge squatting station, squatting company, 50% of the employees on their ledger books were Indigenous workers, black-line workers, predominantly during the Goldfields period. And the only workers left. Their role as guides is, for some reason, Marion spoke about Remembrance Day, so we have memorials literally across Australia. When my folks took us on holidays, we used to go to cemeteries all the time. I think Mum and Dad had big problems with death or something. And often in these old cemeteries that Mum and Dad used to take us to, would be perished in the sort of child, 6 years old, perished in the bush. It seemed like every single cemetery had at least one or two of these poor children and adults who perished in the bush. It was a very frequent occurrence. We can see memorials to, I think it was 2 children up in Dalesford, in my three, in the 1860s. Even into the 1860s and 1870s, suburbs like Lilydale, which are now suburbia, were places where people literally got lost in the bush and died. There's a police officer in Lilydale in 1865 who wandered into the bush and perished. There are some famous examples. There's lots of illustrations of people lost and found. There was one famous occasion when these 3 white children, the Duff children they were called, there's a lovely children illustrated book from this period in the library. I'm not sure why that hasn't been reproduced as well. It's a beautifully illustrated, great sort of story of the white colonists, sort of imploring the Aboriginal people, the trackers, to find them. These 3 Aboriginal trackers found the Duff children after about 8 days out in the bush by themselves. So there's one of the ways we've got to make it connect with our students, our children's students, and that's certainly one of the ways that we can demonstrate that connection between the Aboriginal sort of connection with what their role was on the goldfields. One of the more vivid examples of the role of trackers wasn't just for lost children, it was also for criminals. The native police, which we'll see in a moment, played an integral role in the goldfields, but also as trackers before and after and during the goldfields period. This is believed to be the first photograph that was used in a court of law in Victoria, perhaps in Australia. There happened to be a photographer nearby in Smythesdale, I think it was Smythesdale, Smythesdale, in 1867, as you can see, who the photographer was sort of ready and available, and he took this photograph of 2. One of them is Wathrung, the other one I'm not sure where their country lay. They're pointing towards a gun that they tracked down. And they also tracked the horse of the murderers as well, which led to a conviction and a hanging in what's now S&B, part of University of Ballarat. One of the integral roles in the goldfields was as police. They were the first police on the goldfields, and for a period of time they were the only police force on the goldfields. Again, something that sort of our history books sort of fail to sort of emphasise. These were important roles, as you can well imagine. Imagine not having police in our community today. It's not a very pleasant thought, really. They played an integral role. So the role plays that could be, with your students, of how would you feel if you were the white miner being led away by Aboriginal police? You're going to write stories. There are lots of different accounts of them, as you would expect, of police, as there were lots of different accounts of the white police as well. The Argus correspondent described them as a satanic blackguards, a battalion of satanic blackguards was how he described them. So they were feared. I suppose with fear usually comes some respect. Ned Kelly was apparently, I suppose, so the myth goes, was terrified that he knew that they were the only people likely to capture him, as his Dan Powers, I think the guy's name was, another bushranger had been captured just prior to that by Aboriginal trackers as well. We can see the native police up on their horses here going through Golden Point, just down the gully down here. We're talking very local history here for Ballarat. They rode through these areas. They were the first gold escort between Melbourne and Ballarat. And as you can imagine, the critically important role that they played, that your gold was being placed into their hands and transported, and they never sort of lost an ounce of gold to robbery. And there were lots and lots of illustrations of them. Quite a magnificent sort of figure to see. Sadly, you can't see on the side here, but some of you can see the Aboriginal policeman up on his horse, overseeing the smashing of a sly grog on the goldfields. This poor fellow's trying to getting a terrific storyline for students that pretend you're this digger, abusing the Aboriginal policeman destroying your grog. Many of your students will probably have a background that their forebears came from this sort of background. The oral history of my family was that they came to Bunnyong in the 1850s, and that they set up a sly grog shop and it burnt down. They set up another one and burnt down. Then they shifted to Melbourne. So it could have been hidden.